Have you ever experienced that moment when someone tries to get close to you, and every fiber of your being screams, run? Or maybe you are on the other side, reaching out to touch someone, only to find they vanish the instant you try to connect. Welcome to one of humanity's most puzzling contradictions, the psychological world of avoidant attachment. Picture this: your nervous system is like a sophisticated alarm system, designed specifically to keep you safe. But what happens when that same system starts treating love as a threat? When intimacy becomes more dangerous than isolation? This is exactly what we're diving deep into today. And trust me, the truth you are about to discover will completely transform how you see yourself and your relationships. Here is something that might surprise you. That person who seems impossibly independent, who appears to need no one. They're often fighting a silent battle you can't see. Behind that wall of self-sufficiency lies a story written in childhood, carried into adulthood, and played out in every relationship they touch. Let me paint you a picture that might feel familiar. Imagine a child who learns that reaching out leads to disappointment. Maybe their caregivers were overwhelmed, absent, or emotionally unavailable. This child's brilliant mind makes a calculation. If I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt. Fast forward 20 years. And that same protective strategy is now sabotaging their deepest desires for connection. This is avoidant attachment, and it is far more common than you think. Research shows that roughly 25% of adults carry this pattern. That is 1 in 4 people walking around with an invisible force field, desperately wanting closeness while simultaneously pushing it away. But here is where it gets really fascinating. Neuroscience reveals that even the most avoidant person's body still craves connection. When they see others in distress, their mirror neurons fire. During moments of genuine intimacy, their oxytocin levels spike. Biologically, they're wired for love just like everyone else. The difference, their mind has learned to override their heart's deepest longings. Think of it like this. Imagine you are standing at the edge of crystal clear water on a scorching day. Every cell in your body wants to dive in, but your mind keeps whispering warnings about hidden dangers beneath the surface. That is the internal war of avoidant attachment, biological drive versus psychological protection. Now, let's get practical. How does this actually show up in real life? You might recognize these patterns in yourself or someone you care about. Perhaps you notice yourself feeling claustrophobic when a partner wants to spend too much time together. Maybe you find yourself picking fights right when things get too good, too close, too real. Or perhaps you excel at surface-level friendships, but panic when conversations turn deep. One of my clients described it perfectly. It is like having 2 people living inside me. One wants to be held and never let go. The other wants to run to the mountains and disappear forever. This internal contradiction creates what psychologists call approach, avoidance conflict, simultaneously moving toward and away from the same thing. Here is what makes this particularly heartbreaking. Avoidant individuals often love with incredible depth, but they express it in ways that can be almost invisible. They might not say, "I love you" often, but they'll quietly fix your broken car. They might not initiate deep conversations, but they'll remember every detail you've ever shared. Their love language is often action rather than words, consistency rather than grand gestures. But here is the twist that changes everything. Despite what it might look like from the outside, avoidant attachment isn't about not caring. It is about caring too much. The withdrawal, the emotional distance, the need for space. These aren't signs of indifference. They're signs of a nervous system that has learned to associate vulnerability with danger. Let me share something that might blow your mind. Recent studies using brain imaging show that when avoidant individuals see their loved ones in distress, their brains light up with the same empathetic responses as everyone else. But here is the kicker. Their stress response systems activate simultaneously, creating a neurological tug of war between compassion and self-protection. This explains why someone with avoidant tendencies might seem cold in moments when you most need warmth. It is not that they don't feel your pain. They feel it so intensely that their system shuts down to protect itself from being overwhelmed. Now, if you are someone who loves an avoidant person, you've probably experienced the maddening push-pull cycle. One day they're present, engaged, maybe even vulnerable. The next, it is like they've disappeared behind an invisible wall. You might blame yourself, wondering what you did wrong. But here is the truth. Their withdrawal has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their wiring. Think of it like a smoke detector that is overly sensitive. It goes off not just for fires, but for burnt toast, steam from the shower, even a lit candle. The detector isn't broken, it is just calibrated to detect threat at the smallest signal. That is what happens with an avoidant nervous system and intimacy. But here is where hope enters the picture. Attachment styles aren't permanent, they're patterns, and patterns can be rewired. Neuroscience tells us about something called neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to form new neural pathways throughout our lives. Every time someone with avoidant tendencies chooses to stay present instead of withdrawing, they're literally rewiring their brain. The journey toward what psychologists call earned secure attachment isn't about becoming a completely different person. It is about slowly learning that intimacy doesn't equal danger. It is about discovering that you can maintain your sense of self while also letting others in. It is about finding the sweet spot between independence and interdependence. Let me give you a roadmap for this transformation. If you recognize avoidant patterns in yourself, start small. Maybe it is sharing one vulnerable thing with a trusted friend. Maybe it is asking for help with something minor. Maybe it is simply sitting with the discomfort of someone caring about you without immediately changing the subject. Each small step sends a message to your nervous system. Connection can be safe. Your brain starts to update its threat assessment system. Slowly, intimacy begins to feel less like suffocation and more like breathing room for those loving someone with avoidant attachment. The key is becoming a secure base. Think of yourself as a lighthouse, steady, consistent, and non-demanding. Don't take their need for space personally. Don't pressure them to open up faster than they can handle. Instead, show up consistently. Be patient. Let them set the pace. Here is something beautiful. When avoidant individuals do begin to open up, their capacity for love can be breathtaking. Because they've fought so hard for their independence, when they choose to let someone in, it is a profound act of trust. When they choose vulnerability, it is with the full weight of their being behind it. But let's address the elephant in the room. What about those moments when the avoidant pattern feels too strong, when the pull toward isolation feels overwhelming? This is where self-compassion becomes crucial. The goal isn't to judge yourself for having these patterns. They developed for good reasons. They kept you safe when safety was uncertain. Instead, the goal is awareness. When you notice yourself starting to withdraw, pause, ask yourself, is this withdrawal based on a real threat, or is it my old protection system kicking in? Sometimes you'll realize you actually do need space, and that is okay. Other times, you might recognize it's fear talking, and you can make a different choice. Here is a practice that can be transformative. The next time you feel the urge to push someone away, try staying for just one more minute. Don't force yourself into deep vulnerability. Just practice staying present. Notice what happens in your body. Notice the urge to flee, but also notice that you can survive the discomfort of closeness. Now, let's talk about something society doesn't discuss enough. Our culture glorifies the strong, independent archetype. We admire people who seem to need no one, who appear invulnerable. But what if true strength isn't about standing alone? What if courage isn't found in emotional isolation, but in the willingness to be seen, known, and loved? The most resilient people aren't those who never need anyone. They're those who can be both independent and interdependent. They can stand on their own feet, while also knowing when to lean on others. They understand that vulnerability isn't weakness. It is the birthplace of genuine connection. Here is what I want you to understand. If you struggle with avoidant patterns, you are not broken. You are not defective. You are not unlovable. You are a human being who learned to protect yourself in the best way you knew how. And now, as an adult, you have the power to choose new patterns. Every relationship you enter is an opportunity to practice a different way of being. Every moment of genuine connection is evidence to your nervous system that intimacy can be safe. Every time you choose to stay instead of run, you are rewriting the story of your attachment. But here is the deeper truth. The journey towards secure attachment isn't just about fixing something broken. It is about coming home to yourself. It is about reclaiming the parts of you that went into hiding long ago. It is about remembering that you are worthy of love, Not despite your need for connection, but because of it. The walls you built to keep pain out are also keeping love out. The armor that once protected you is now preventing the very intimacy your soul craves. And while taking off that armor feels terrifying, it is also the only way to truly live. But let's explore this complex psychological landscape even deeper. Avoidant attachment isn't just an individual struggle. It also reflects broader patterns in our society. We live in a culture that celebrates self-reliance, individualism, and the "I don't need anyone" mentality. From childhood, we're taught to be strong, not to depend on others, to be our own hero. These messages, while sometimes helpful, can also inadvertently reinforce avoidant patterns. When someone who is already inclined toward avoiding intimacy hears messages like, "You only need yourself," it validates their deepest fears. Depending on others really is dangerous. But here is a revolutionary idea. What if we redefine strength? What if true strength isn't about never needing help, but about knowing when to seek it? What if courage isn't about bearing everything alone, but about allowing others to share the burden? Let me tell you something fascinating about neuroscience. When we're in states of genuine connection, when we feel seen, heard, understood, our brains release a chemical called oxytocin. This bonding hormone doesn't just make us feel good. It actually helps regulate our stress response, lowers our blood pressure, and even boosts our immune system. In other words, connection isn't just nice to have, it is literally essential for our physical health. Avoiding connection doesn't just deprive us of emotional nourishment, it can actually harm our physical well-being. This is even more profound for people with avoidant tendencies, because their systems are already in a state of chronic protection. Cortisol and adrenaline tend to run higher than average. Their nervous systems are often on high alert, scanning for potential threats, including threats from the very people they care about most. But here is the hopeful message. When people with avoidant patterns begin to experience safe connection, their entire physiology starts to change. Their stress hormone levels begin to normalize. Their sleep improves. Their digestive systems function better. Their immune systems grow stronger. This isn't psychological mumbo-jumbo, this is hard science. Our bodies are designed to thrive in connection, and when we deprive ourselves of that connection, we pay a price that is not just emotional. Now, let's talk about how avoidant attachment manifests across different life stages. In childhood, this might look like an independent kid who doesn't seem to need much comfort. Teachers and parents might praise this child's sufficiency, not knowing that beneath the surface, this child might be learning to suppress their natural need for comfort. In adolescence, avoidant patterns might show up as resistance to romantic relationships, preferring friendships over deeper connections, or showing up in relationships, but maintaining emotional distance. These teenagers might be seen as mature or focused, but they might be missing crucial developmental experiences in learning how to navigate intimacy. In early adulthood, these patterns often become most apparent in romantic relationships. Young adults with avoidant tendencies might find themselves caught in a cycle, being attracted to someone, pursuing them, then panicking when the relationship becomes too real. They might find themselves looking for flaws in their partner or creating drama to manufacture distance. In midlife, avoidant patterns might manifest as workaholism, over-focus on achievement, or maintaining many shallow relationships instead of a few deep ones. These individuals might look very successful on the outside, but feel lonely and disconnected on the inside. In later life, the costs of avoidant patterns might become more apparent. As physical health begins to decline, as friends and family members begin to pass away, those who have spent a lifetime avoiding deep connection might find themselves facing profound loneliness and isolation. But remember, it is never too late to begin healing. The brain's plasticity continues throughout life, which means it is possible to learn new ways of connecting, even at 70, 80, or 90 years old. Let's talk about some practical healing strategies. If you recognize avoidant patterns in yourself, here are some ways you can begin. First, practice noticing your body signals. What happens in your body when someone starts to get close? Do your shoulders tense? Does your breathing get shallow? Does your heart rate increase? Learning to recognize these early warning signals can help you make conscious choices before automatically withdrawing. Second, start allowing yourself to experience small doses of vulnerability. Maybe it is admitting you made a mistake, or asking a friend for advice, or sharing something you are worried about. Start small and gradually increase your vulnerability tolerance. Third, practice opposite action. When your impulse is to withdraw, see if you can take a small step in the opposite direction. If you want to cancel plans, maybe go but leave early. If you want to avoid a deep conversation, maybe share one small personal detail. Fourth, seek professional support. Therapists, especially those with specialized training in attachment theory, can provide invaluable support in healing these deep patterns. They can help you understand where your patterns came from and how to begin changing them. Now, if you love someone with avoidant patterns, here are ways you can help. First, educate yourself about attachment theory. Understanding that their behavior isn't a personal attack, but rather a learned protective strategy, can help you respond with compassion rather than frustration. Second, become a source of predictability and consistency. Don't try to fix them or force them to change. Instead, focus on being a safe, reliable presence. Over time, this consistency can begin to soften their defenses. Third, respect their need for space while also communicating your availability. You might say something like, "I understand you need some space right now. I'll be here when you are ready to connect." Fourth, celebrate small steps. When they do share something personal or reach out for support, recognize that this is a big step for them. Don't ask for more, just appreciate what they're giving. Now, let's discuss some of the more subtle aspects. Avoidant attachment doesn't just affect romantic relationships, it impacts all types of connection. People with avoidant patterns might have many acquaintances but few intimate friends. They might be reliable, supportive friends, but they might not share their own struggles or vulnerabilities. In the workplace, these patterns might show up as preferring to work independently, avoiding collaboration, or feeling uncomfortable with feedback or mentorship. While these individuals might be highly competent and self-sufficient, they might miss out on the benefits of collaboration and mentoring relationships. In parenting, adults with avoidant patterns might struggle to provide practical support and stability, but have difficulty with emotional availability. They might encourage their children's independence, but inadvertently communicate that vulnerability or needing help is unacceptable. Recognizing these patterns is the first step in changing them. If you are a parent with avoidant tendencies, seeking support to learn how to be more emotionally available is one of the most valuable things you can do for your children. Let's also talk about some of the positive aspects of avoidant attachment. Yes, you heard that right. There are positive aspects. People with avoidant patterns often develop incredible self-reliance, resilience, and independence. They're often the people others turn to in crises, able to stay calm and focused when others might be overwhelmed. They're often excellent problem solvers because they're used to relying on themselves to find solutions. They often have a strong sense of boundaries and rarely have problems with overgiving or losing their sense of identity. The key is maintaining these strengths while also learning to allow more connection. The goal isn't to become dependent or lose your independence. It is to learn to reach out for support when you need it and to allow intimacy when it is offered. Now, let's delve deeper into the healing process. Healing avoidant attachment isn't a linear process. There will be forward movement and backward steps, breakthroughs and setbacks. This is normal and expected. Think of healing like learning a new language. At first, everything feels foreign and uncomfortable. Your mouth isn't used to forming new sounds. Your brain has to work hard to find the right words. But with practice, it gets easier. Eventually, the new language starts to feel more natural. Healing avoidant attachment is similar. At first, vulnerability and connection feel foreign, even scary. But with practice, as positive experiences accumulate, it starts to feel safer and more natural. One of the most challenging parts of the healing process is learning to tolerate uncertainty in relationships. Avoidant patterns often stem from fear of being abandoned or hurt, so the uncertainty that is inherent in any relationship can trigger the impulse to withdraw. Learning to sit with this uncertainty, to recognize that all relationships involve some degree of risk, is a crucial part of the healing process. It is not about eliminating risk. That is impossible. It is about deciding that the benefits of connection outweigh the potential pain. Let's also talk about the role of self-compassion. Many people with avoidant patterns are extremely hard on themselves, criticizing themselves for not being good enough at connection or for being too needy. This internal critic actually makes healing more difficult because it adds another layer of shame. Learning to treat yourself with compassion, to recognize that your patterns are adaptive responses to difficult circumstances, is a key part of healing. You are not broken or defective. You are human, doing your best to protect yourself. The healing journey might feel like dismantling walls you've spent a lifetime building, and that can be scary. But remember, those walls were built to protect something precious: your heart, your soul, your deep longing for connection. Now, it is time to let those precious parts see the light again. Step by step, breath by breath, one vulnerable moment at a time, you can learn a new way of being. You can learn to be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected, both protected and open. This is the true promise of avoidant attachment healing. Not becoming a different person, but becoming a more complete version of who you've always been. Someone capable of both giving and receiving love. Someone who can stand alone, but also lean on others. Someone who knows that true strength lies not in never needing anyone, but in having the courage to reach out, even at the risk of being rejected. Your story isn't over. The next chapter is waiting to be written. And this time, it can be a story of connection, courage, and becoming the deeply loved person you were always meant to be. The walls that once kept you safe can become bridges that connect you to others. The armor that protected you can transform into wings that lift you toward the love you've always deserved. Remember, you are not too much. You are not too little. You are not broken. You are exactly as you should be in this moment. And from this moment, anything is possible. The journey from avoidance to connection is one of the bravest adventures you can undertake, and you don't have to take it alone.